series. There's one more. John Papatanakis. Am I paranoid and being terrified by Trump's withdrawal from the INF Treaty? In other words, is this just more of the same or mark as a quantitative shift in the U.S. foreign policy for the worse? In a similar vein, is the United States planning to turn Europe into a theater of war against Russia? So this question is twofold. This is, in some part, brinksmanship. In some part, John Bolton doesn't believe in treaties. Just as outright, he doesn't believe in treaties. Part of that has to do with the United States being a superpower, and it being a superpower, any treaty to some degree limits an edge that we might otherwise have. We're putting weapons in space. That's forcing China, India, and Russia to also put weapons in space. Because the moment that one country does it, all countries have to do it. If you allow one country to put weapons in space, that country will be able to dominate the other countries because you may have weapons platforms without the ability to deal with it, if that makes sense. So you can't allow it. The same thing is true for the nuclear proliferation treaties that Donald Trump has been pulling out of. The Democratic Party has been screaming to high heaven that Trump has been colluding with the Russians. But if you listen to Vladimir Putin and some of the speeches that he's been given, he's been very serious saying this is not a game, this is not a joke. The U.S. has been pulling out of these treaties. I don't necessarily know if they're trying to turn Europe into a battlefield. I don't think they are. I think this is a certain degree of brinksmanship. This notion that the U.S. can push his weight around because the other countries don't necessarily want a war. He's trying to pull China into a nuclear proliferation treaty with Russia. Now, that could just be the political covering for a reason for him to pull out the treaty. There's a secondary thing to this of a weapons spike. The United States supplies more weapons than anyone else around the world, so any purchasing of weapons is going to mostly benefit the United States, even though Russia has been selling a ton of their weaponry to various countries that were even in some in NATO, meaning India and... Is India in NATO? Turkey, definitely. Look, some of this is brinksmanship. Some of this is trying to sell more weapons. And some of this is trying to rope China into agreements. That's assuming that there are agreements at all. John Bolton is a lunatic. And I got to be honest, the Democratic Party has their head in their ass on this. They are screaming about Trump and Russia while simultaneously Trump has been pulling out of one treaty after the next. Those treaties have been a bedrock of security between the United States and Russia for the last 40 years. And Trump is getting rid of them. It makes a potential miscommunication more likely. It will cause a weapons race, meaning the United States is going to start building weapons. Russia is going to start building weapons. And that start, I would wager to you that they're pulling out of this because they've already started, meaning the weapons race is most likely already on. They keep talking about this as if we may have another Cold War. We have a Cold War. They're just pretending, or they're going with this notion that Donald Trump is working with Russians, so they don't necessarily see it for what it is. They act like Trump is colluding. Trump is not colluding. You should want Trump to be working with the Russians in order to bring down the tensions, because right now, this is bad. This is extraordinarily bad. Charles Pierre, the U.S. definitely wants a World War III to save its failing economy. I don't think so. Remember, it was World War I and World War II that raised the U.S. economy. Don't underestimate America's evil. I know, that's true, but those wars, in neither war did the U.S. want to get involved. Neither war. The U.S. did not want to get involved in either one of those wars. And in fact, the First World War, Germany tried to pull back at the last minute. But it was too late. At one point the Kaiser was like, we're not going to have a war, we're not going to have a war. But at that point, the shots had already been fired. The war had already started. So him pulling back the blank check, it was too late. That decimated Europe. The U.S. industry was able to take advantage of Europe being decimated. That's true. But this is a war not with Europe being decimated. This is a war where the U.S. is on a chopping block. And in a nuclear war, we're not talking about America's being able to get its industry and everything else up. We're talking about America being decimated. We have no experience of being in a situation where there is war on our soil in our lifetime. God, man, I understand that some of these people are evil, but I think it's more along the lines of brinksmanship and trying to be able to force their way and impose their will. I think the problem comes kind of just like the countries, World War I and World War II, believe and they they underestimate the reaction of other countries. And I think that's potentially true here. I don't necessarily think it's we want a war. I think it's we want to get our fledgling industries up and we want to increase the amount of money that is going to our weapons manufacturers, because at the very least, those are jobs. Keep in mind, if you're going to do anything about the military and anything about the spending on weapons and everything else, a large segment of our economy is weapons. We're the number one manufacturers in the world, weapons manufacturers of the world. So this notion that you're going to cut back on that, half of the jobs or half of the money that we spend on military are jobs. It's a jobs plan. If you pull back on that, you're cutting on jobs also, meaning those jobs have to be replaced by something. If they're that hideously evil, where they're planning a World War III and actively pursuing one, that's tremendous, and that is not going to work out in a favorable way. I suspect it's more brinksmanship. I strongly suspect it's brinksmanship. But look, whether it's planning or brinksmanship, it's almost irrelevant. Just like in World War I, those countries stumble. Do you realize our world is literally shaped by what took place in World War I? Without World War I, there's no there's no Lenin, there's no Russian Revolution. There is no, the map of Europe looks different. Whether the Austrian-Hungarian Empire still survives or not, it's unclear. But our world is literally shaped by that war. There's no Adolf Hitler. There's no America doesn't become a superpower in this regard. It's extraordinary how we're still dealing with the repercussions of that war. Not to mention the things that people were doing in those wars. It's utterly devastating. Utterly devastating. I don't believe I think it's brinksmanship. But whether it's brinksmanship or not, the key word in that is brink. And these guys, I think they believe that the others will back down. And that's not what's happening. This is no longer a unipolar world. And if the people in this country are acting on the premise that it is, yes, that will land you into a conflict. The trade war with China, even that is problematic. Even that is problematic. So yeah, I feel you, man. But hopefully that's not what's taking place.